How did you work through that? Because again, that sliding door moment can dictate whether your relationship fails or whether it can be like you, where you can sit here right now and you can say, we've overcome this.
Well, number one, couple rules around this for me personally. You have to be willing to work on yourself. So couples therapy, in my opinion, doesn't work that well if you're not also willing to work on yourself. Second, you cannot change your marriage alone. Can't do it. And so if you're in a situation where you're working on yourself and you're willing to change, but you have a partner that won't go to therapy or won't work on themselves or won't get sober or won't take, like I actually said to Chris, one of the conditions is you have to take medication for a year for depression. Dr. Amen just looked at your brain and said normally when he sees a brain like this, they're already dead. Not from natural causes. And the fact that you meditate and you are basically sober except for if like you're going to have a sip of champagne or something, which is almost never, and you exercise every day, you have an incredible relationship with your kids, and you have very meaningful work, you have done absolutely everything to address your depression, but you're still locked in this fog. You need a ladder. Like this is going to work with this. And so if you are making very clear and reasonable requests based on what you need from your partner in order for them to be working on themselves or to show up for you in a way where the toxic behavior or the scary or unhealthy behavior is getting the support. If you have somebody that will not go to therapy or will not actually do the things that are a bare minimum that you need them to do to stop yelling at you, to stop, you know what I'm saying, that sort of thing, then you're out.
Did you give him an ultimatum then?
I did, about the medication.
Did you?
Yeah. Because he had been struggling for a long time. And I didn't even realize how much he had been struggling. And the medication was something that I needed him to do because there was a fog there. And I could see that there was a fog there. And I knew that it was something bigger than him. And so it made a huge difference. And after a year, it had made a huge difference. He doesn't take it anymore.
How did you do the ultimatum? Sorry, this is one of these so powerful things that you kind of like, yeah. Everyone at home is like, how do you do that?
You sit down and tell him. And you tell him in therapy. It was over the course of literally months and months and months of talking about particular issues. And then finally I said, here are my non-negotiables. You have to take antidepressant medication. And what was interesting about it is the reason why, because Chris is not anti-medication, but it triggered the feelings of being a failure. And finally, he connected the dots to this deeper story. I am a failure. I can't even get a hold of this. And so that was a huge transformative moment in our relationship. and excuse me, a really beautiful one. And, you know, the thing is about my husband is he is the kindest, most amazing person. And it just goes to show you that when you try to organize your entire life around living up to somebody's expectations, whether it's your father's or society or your spouse's or your friends, you will be miserable. And so I feel grateful that we had the breakdown that we had. I feel grateful that all of this came to the surface because most of us are really amazing at coping or numbing or avoiding or running away from. Like, I think I've spent years trying to outrun my anxiety, my childhood trauma. Busyness became my addiction. And it also became my death sentence. And one of the greatest gifts that happened during the pandemic was life stopped and I couldn't go anywhere. And when I couldn't go anywhere and I couldn't run to catch a plane, I became present to the campaign of misery that was running nonstop in my head. And I often look at Chris and I say to him, I break into tears and I'm like, thank you for being with me. Like, I know I'm not easy. And I know I'm a positive and optimistic person, but I also know that this intensity is really hard. And because I want to be softer, and I am a very loving person. But Chris and I kind of got into these roles where I'm like playing the role of his dad, very familiar to him. It really brought to the surface these old generational patterns that don't serve us. And so, one of the things that I would say is, if you have someone that you're in a relationship with and there's a lot of friction, which we all have if you've been, with somebody for a while, work on yourself, start becoming aware of that alarm, learn how to actually give yourself the love and reassurance that you didn't get as a kid in those moments where you feel separate. The second thing I would say is the greatest gift, if you can afford it, is having some kind of marriage person, counselor, therapy person, social worker, spiritual guide, whatever, you can talk to once a month, because it becomes a place where a third party can actually witness the dynamics between the two of you that you're so used to that neither one of you see. And it gives you a safe place to practice new ways of speaking and to air out shit. Like, one of the things we've been talking about with our therapist is the fact that everybody in the family wants a new puppy. And Chris takes care of the dog. And he's like, I know how this rodeo goes. This new puppy comes rolling in here and everybody's enamored for 2 weeks. And then guess who's up at 5:45 in the morning? Me. And I don't want a second dog. Oh, come on, Dad. Come on, Chris. Don't be a party. But Mel, that is a boundary. You calling me the party pooper or the questioner really invalidates me, because you're not hearing my concern. You're not seeing me. And so we have literally spent 2 or 3 sessions talking about the fact that Chris's opinion is correct. He shouldn't trust me and our 17-year-old son, because we have not demonstrated through our actions that we can be trusted around the dog in terms of being the primary person with the dog. And so we had to come up with, well, what are all the things, if my son and I really want the puppy, what are all the things we would have to do? And so it was a really interesting conversation, because I had to see my own toxic behavior of using enthusiasm to bulldoze people.
Oh, and that's what actually I was going to follow up and ask, because you said earlier we've got into a pattern. And so especially when you've been with someone for a while, that pattern, sometimes you don't even realize it's a behavior, right? You're just like, oh, it is, versus, oh no, I'm bringing this to the table over and over and over again. So just like you said, that's so powerful of that you used your enthusiasm. And I've heard you also speak about how, the dismissiveness in the language that we use, but sometimes may not realize we're using it. There was like something that you said one time, Chris asked you or something like, well, what's the weather like? And you're like, I'm not a freaking news reporter. Things like that, where sometimes maybe you are just joking, but it underlying, if you do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, even if you say a little comment like that, then maybe you are just joking, it's built up where now that is something that has actually triggered him, that now makes him feel dismissive. How do you start to unwind that pattern?
I think you just start to do it by noticing. Again, it's going back to this really simplistic advice. If Chris says to me, what's the weather going to be? And I'm like, I don't know. Do I look like a weather reporter? Something like that, really just snarky ass thing. If I say that to him, he is going to feel the friction in his body. And he is going to have an experience that he doesn't matter. He is going to, in that moment, his body will remember opening up the door of his childhood home and nobody's there. Yet again. And so, and it doesn't matter what he does. Doesn't matter if he asks nicely. He was just curious. He thought since I was up early, I might know. I always know. So why shouldn't I ask? He didn't realize it was a landmine to step on. But now all of a sudden, he's feeling that friction. That's step one. Notice it. Step two is to absolutely then just soothe yourself for a second. You know, just put your hand on your stomach or just like go, oh, there it is. There's the little me. I just feel separated from Mel right now because she made fun of me. She's an asshole to me. Notice that and actually validate it. And then you need to say something.
But do you think it's his responsibility to tell you in those moments
Yes.
that's how he's feeling? Because
Yes.
if you said that to me, I would just laugh, right? Because I don't
because
have
it's
the
not your trigger.
baggage. Right, exactly. That's my, yeah.
That you said
Correct.
your triggers are personal. You also said they're your responsibility.
Yeah.
You cannot expect another human being to know where your emotional landmines are. And if somebody steps on an emotional landmine inside of you, which you know when it happens because you feel friction in your body, that's the emotional landmine from your past exploding.
So do you recommend then a good place to start when you're getting into even a relationship is listing out what your emotional landmines are?
Well, I think you need to do that for yourself.
Whether you're in a relationship or not.
Yes,
Yeah.
because your roommate's going to trigger it. You know how people get in these really like, these emotional tizzies with roommates or like people they live with like in college. They leave their dishes in the sink. What is that actually making somebody feel? It's making you feel disrespected. It's making you feel like your need to have the kitchen clean doesn't matter to this person. It makes you feel separate. It's the same thing. You will not be able to express the boundary in an effective way if you haven't first recognized what it's triggering in you. It starts with you. So yes, I think everybody should. Everybody should absolutely do this. And the other thing that's really interesting is that I have, through all this work that not only Chris and I have been doing, but that I have been doing to really once and for all deeply heal this alarm of anxiety in me and to simplify my life and to truly be happier and more connected to people that I care about. One of the things that has been really interesting about this is that I have noticed how often I block love, that I don't even allow it to flow in my direction.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, like since I've been working on this, like when you came out with the balloons, because today's my birthday, or last year when you like celebrated me on my book launch day, there's something about the work I'm doing and our relationship where I am able to, like galley doors on a kitchen, allow it to flow so freely and effortlessly with you. I can receive it from you. I can give everything back to you. But I haven't always been that way. And it's because of this separateness that so many of us, myself included, had the lived experience that it comes your way based on a transaction, that it's conditional. And so it means that when you would allow it in, there is a cost. And so for me, one of the biggest things that I've done in my marriage that has really improved it is how I'm showing up and seeing, and it makes me really sad to think about the number of years that, my amazing, kind husband was trying to love me. Oh, I'll come down tonight, babe. I'll drive down. I'm like, oh, it's okay. You don't need to come. I got it. And then I'm lonely and I'm alone and I'm continuing with my story that it's all on me. And I've blocked love. And so there's a huge part of this too, if you want to work on your relationship, of really taking a look at where do you stop love from coming in? Where is your inability to trust and to allow it to flow into your life, not letting you link in a more profound way with your friends or, you know, the lover of your life. And so the other thing that I wanted to say, Lisa, about working on it, if you have somebody that's willing to go to therapy, or if you have somebody that's willing to do the work, you cannot change your marriage if you are with somebody who will not actually do the work. That's number one. You can change how you feel in it, but you cannot change the dynamic entirely. However, I don't know a single person who has been married as long as you and Tom and Chris and I have been married, who hasn't had really difficult periods in their relationship. And I don't know a single couple that has been married as long as you and Tom and me and Chris have been married, who have worked at it, who regretted it.
Ooh.
Now, that doesn't mean you should stay forever and try to change something that makes you miserable with a partner who's not willing to do the work. But if you have somebody that is willing to meet you halfway, you will never regret at least trying to make it better.
Dude, I think that is so freaking strong, because the amount of people that, and you actually answered my next question, because the amount of people that will stay in a relationship and try and make it work, and then 8 years later, they look back, they leave the relationship, like, I've just wasted 8 years of my life. They weren't going to change anyway. I spent the last 8 years trying. And literally, you just answered it. It was like, well, are they willing to or not?
Yeah, like you need to, like, you're not trying to fix the relationship if they're not actually meeting you halfway. And look, it may take you 8 years to do the work personally.
Right.
To find the courage to leave and the clarity to leave. You may be so conditioned from your childhood, or you may be so spun around by somebody who has a narcissistic personality or somebody who's abusive. And going to therapy for yourself, even if they won't, that will actually change the relationship, because it will change you. And from a position of better clarity, power, confidence, and support, you will finally be able to see things that you can't see when you are mired in your own trauma, or constantly have the alarm going off but don't know what to do, or you're being emotionally abused or physically abused.
What about the people, though, that try to keep them down? Because when you have couples where one of them's really growing and developing and improving, and especially as you do your own work, right, you start to get more comfortable in setting boundaries. You always hear, it's like, oh my God, you're changing. Oh, you've changed.
Yeah.
And partners sometimes try to keep you back, try to keep you small.
I think that this is an absolutely natural part of what happens when one person in a relationship is growing and the other one isn't. And I'm going to give you an example of how everything we've talked about works in this scenario. And again, I will be the bad guy. So, Chris, as I mentioned, does not drink. I mean, it's not like he's been sober for a couple years, and then maybe he'll like have a beer on occasion, or like if he were here for my birthday, he'd probably drink a half a glass of champagne, but take it or leave it. And when he first started not drinking,
Because he was drinking too much, and then he decided not to?
he was numbing anxiety and depression with 4 bourbons a night.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I was drinking a lot too. Like, we were both numbing and outrunning all of it back in the day. So when he left the restaurant business in 2014, he did not drink or smoke weed for 2 years, period. Just cold turkey. And I remember the first couple nights, he's like, I'm not drinking. I need to get my health in order. I need to heal myself. I need to do some deep work. Like, I'm really fucked up. And so I'm like, okay, I got it. I was like, whoo, this is a great idea. And I was, really supportive for about 3 days. And then his change became kind of annoying, because I was used to opening up a bottle of wine while I cooked dinner. And here's what's interesting. The 4th night, I open up a bottle of rosé. I'm cooking up dinner. I go to pour myself a glass, and I'm like, would you like a glass of wine? He's like, nope, I'm all set. And I'm like, you sure? I mean, it's just like juice. And he looks at me and he says, Mel. I said, no. do not ask me if I want to have a glass of wine again. And I said, well, I'm really sorry. You're right, you're right, you're right. Oh my God, you're right. You're trying not to drink. I'm so sorry. It's just that I feel self-conscious opening up this bottle and pouring myself a glass of wine. I feel like there's something wrong with me. And he said, Mel, nobody cares what's in your cup but you. And if my choices are making you question yours, maybe you have some work to do. And so I want to tell everybody that story because when anybody grows or changes, it makes the people around you question what they're doing. So if you stay in on a Saturday night and your whole group of college friends are used to going out, but you're staying in because you're working on your business plan, people are going to go, come on, Lisa, but come on. Because you staying in makes them stop and think about what they're doing. When you start getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and going to a new spin class, when your roommates are sleeping and hungover, or your partner is, it makes them question why they're laying in bed. And it's easier to poke fun at you, just like I did with Chris, than to actually push yourself to change. And so that type of behavior is 100% normal. You should absolutely expect it. And if it continues, do what Chris did and push back on it. That's, again, this boundary thing that you have to know your triggers.
God, I love that. And you're so damn self-aware and so open because you said it earlier, like, I'm the asshole. I think just admitting it allows you now to change, right? It now allows you to have that better relationship. And so in moments like that, where you do this reflect, I can just imagine, like, as you were saying, I was like, oh yeah, I get it. Because when you're with someone, there's a certain behavior that then gets accepted. They accept you, you accept them. And then by them stopping it, it now may bring up shame, guilt, all the things that you don't feel when they do it with you. But now all of a sudden, you do feel it because now you're quote unquote alone.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. And this one's like really benign, but again, it's one of those little things in a relationship that can like explode into a big thing. So the other night I was home in Vermont and I'd spent the day working all day, and we were leaving the next morning to start this 2-week trip to go on the road to promote the podcast. And so I finish working at like 5:30 at night. I come out of the upstairs office where my, podcast studio and where we work, come down into the kitchen, give Chris a big old hug. I'm so excited to hang out with him. And he's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, I have a 2-hour Zoom call tonight because I'm leading a discussion about, I can't remember what it was, for all the alumni of Soul Degree, his retreat. And I felt that that kind of like, are you kidding? That comes, that little injustice, that little, this is my, and because of all the work I'm doing, I noticed it. I always like put my hand right here. And then I just said, oh, okay, well, I'm sad. I need to tell you that I'm sad because I was really wanting to just be with you tonight. And he said, I know. I said, I'm really sorry. He said, I don't know why, you didn't see it in the calendar. I apologize. I spaced that tomorrow you're leaving when I scheduled this. I'm really sorry. Can you wait until 9 o'clock to eat so we can eat together? And so instead of it being the old thing, which is me being pissed and then sort of like, oh, okay. And then him not feeling supported. And it's just a function of both of us being kind of busy. We were able to just diffuse it, ask for what we need, express how we were feeling. We're both disappointed because he realized when I told him that I wouldn't be done till 5:30 that this, you know what I mean? And it became a moment for connection instead of one of those little death by 1,000 cuts sort of emotional things that happen in a relationship.
And that's and being that honest, like, I really want people to, you guys have been together for 26 years. I've been with Tom for 22. We just celebrated our 20-year wedding anniversary. And that communication, that level of transparency is forever. It's like the work in a relationship, it needs to be like, as you grow, as your partner changes, you need to kind of evolve together and then be honest with it. And as you were saying the story, literally 2 days ago, so I got COVID weeks back. And so because I had COVID, I wasn't near Tom because he couldn't afford, obviously, to get sick, because if we're both sick, our business stops. And so he's...
That was it, too. I'm sorry to interrupt you,
no.
but Chris had COVID for the 4 days. Like, he was also quarantining for like 5 days, and I felt this deep sadness.
Yeah.
Like, did you just like totally miss him because you're in the same house
So
and you can't be...
It becomes a thing that you have to start to go deep inside, because it's easy to go, oh, well, I've just got COVID and you're just in the other room. And so it got to the point where we were FaceTiming each other, because he then slept in another room. So we were FaceTiming each other. And then he traveled. And then as soon as he got back, I then left. So literally for 3 weeks, we don't really like actually hold hands, have that skin to skin. Then I go away. Now, I got back like 2 days ago. And I get back and we've got a deal. I never have to pick him up from the airport. He never has to pick me up. That's a waste of time, because now you're driving halfway. Anyway, so we just, because productivity is like one of our high values that we both have, it's not productive, babe, for you to come to the airport. So that's just an agreement. But all my other friends, their partners come to the airport to pick them up.
Yeah, I would not. I'd be like, what? Well, actually, when I lived in Boston, it's not true. I would just take a car service home.
So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to take, like, I don't think twice about it. But there's these death by 1,000 cuts, like you said. And I find myself very secure in my relationship. But it's a death by 1,000 cuts. So I don't realize the first cut starts 3 weeks ago, right? And so now we don't talk to each other. He gets busy. There were a couple of nights that he was in Florida, so the time difference, we missed each other. So we didn't even get to say goodnight to each other. And then it comes to the point where I get back from my trip. He doesn't pick me up from the airport. I don't expect him to, but then I come home and I expect that, oh my God, baby. And I walk in and he's in this intense business call. So he doesn't even look at me. Now, he's in a very intense business call. So to him, he's like, if I look at her now, he knows how tense he feels. So he's like, if I look at her now, she's not going to feel the warmth. So I just won't look at her.
Oh, my God.
Now, of course, I walk in
Yes.
and I go, he doesn't even look at me. I would rather the intense look and the like pointing at the phone. That's what I would rather. But we're both not mind readers.
Right.
So in his actions, it becomes the last freaking gaping cut that now I'm just bleeding everywhere, right? If we could stay with that metaphor. And so I just get upset. Now, it's not normally like me. I'm normally emotionally sober. I can normally regulate myself, identify where the uncomfortableness is, where like the process.
Yep.
But I just fucking lost it. And I was like, oh, you don't care about me. And as soon as you start to use absolutes, you know it's an emotional thing.
Right.
With someone that you love and you've been with.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, you're not romantic anymore. And it became this big grand thing. And then, of course, bless him, because we've known each other for a while. He's like, okay, my wife, she's been pushed to the edge. So I know, okay, and I even said, I'm really tired. I haven't seen you in a long time. I just need time to cool down, because I knew myself. And I knew that anything else out of my mouth was just going to be more absolute
Right.
that aren't actually true.
Yes.
So going back to your point of like identifying when you're the asshole, I then afterwards calmed down, realized, oh, Lisa, that was ridiculous. You overreacted. You need to say you overreacted. You need to go to him and say that. But you have to do the work and identify where it started from. And that's where I started to go,
The feeling of separate.
It felt separate.
Yeah,
3
and you've been
weeks ago.
feeling that separate feeling for a while.
But I didn't speak up over those 3 weeks, because I was like, oh, well, he's in another town. Well, I've got COVID. Going back to, you just use the reasons and the excuses of maybe why you're not connecting. And sometimes it then ends up on this big eruption.
Yeah.
So this is very important, because I made a major mistake with Chris. And that is, I did not understand what it does to a man's psyche when he is not successful, and more dangerous when something he's doing is failing and failing publicly. And I had a lot of anger out of financial fear, and I'm talking very generally about standard gender norms.
Right.
So for a guy, the pressure to be a man is about providing, it's about money in the bank, it's about all of the stuff wrapped around success. We feel the same pressure from society around how we look, about our age, about how thin we are, and the pressure is the exact same. Because what happens is when you're not successful as a guy, you not only feel the fear that you're feeling, you feel shame, you feel embarrassment, you feel like a loser, you feel like the world's worst husband. So you gotta understand that, because he's already trashing himself more than you ever will. And then what happens though is when you add on to that any kind of criticism, any kind of opinion, any kind of anything but encouragement, it craters them even more. And so Chris and I got into this mode where he was shutting down, he was snapping, he was angry, we were both drinking way too much. And luckily, a bunch of stuff started to happen, and just like you, as I was changing, it was not on the same timeline that he was changing. And so any of my optimism, any of my enthusiasm, any of my success that was starting to happen only shined a light on everything that was lacking. And so what your husband needs, I don't know if he deserves it or not, but I'm gonna tell you what he needs. I'm gonna assume he deserves it because he's probably working really hard and he's probably beating himself up, is he needs encouragement. He doesn't need coaching from you, that'll destroy your marriage. He needs encouragement and validation. And the other thing that I noticed, and this is what's gonna come next, because if your career starts to take off because you're doing all this personal development and your mindset's on fire and you're super expansive, which is super annoying, by the way, to somebody who's down low, you're gonna get what's called breadwinner resentment rage, which as the roles flip in your marriage, you're gonna start to get pissed off that you're the one doing everything and that you're bringing money in. And you're also doing most of the chores at home. And you're also, and why aren't you stepping up when I'm going over here? Which, by the way, makes him feel like this too. So what do you do about it? I think the most important thing is you guys gotta have a conversation, like one for real, about where he's at and what he's feeling. And ask him, what does he need for support? Because we only guess. And, you know, I can tell you one other story. When we got the news about the talk show, not going to season 2, I, of course, was in like an emotional roller coaster for a good week or so. And every day I would come home because my way of dealing with stuff is to try to fix it. And so every day I would come home and I'd be like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go raise money and I'm gonna buy the show back myself. And then I'm gonna call the syndicator and I'm gonna do it myself. And then Chris, being analytical, would go, so who exactly are you gonna call? And he's not questioning, he's just curious. And then the second day I would come home and I'd be like, I have an idea. I'm gonna go straight to all the advertisers that integrated with the show and I'm gonna pitch them on a digital, and he'd be like, oh, so who's on the top of the list? He's just having a conversation. And then the third day I come home and I'm like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start doing online courses again. Oh, so you're gonna use Kajabi as a back? And I'm like, will you stop asking me questions? And he looked at me and he's like, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to help. And I said, let me tell you what I need. Until I'm sane, whenever I come home with an idea, just say these words. That's a great idea. Because I just need validation right now. That's all that I need. And so I think you should ask him, what can you do to support him? If you see him doing things to try to change what's going on, validate that and understand he's already beating himself up. And your job, if you want to help him resurrect the business, if you want this to bring you together, you gotta be the one that's lifting him up through this, because he can't do that for himself.
7 common types of disrespect that you need to call out. So, number 1, this is when people talk over you. Yes, it happens all the time. You may not even be aware of how often it is happening to you. Now, for example, I'm going to give you an example from my own life. I did not realize that I am guilty of talking over one of my daughters. And, I said very early on in this video to you that a lot of people that are engaging in these common forms of disrespect don't really realize when they're doing it. And the reason why they don't realize it is because they've been doing it for so long and people just sort of put up with it and don't call them out on it, that you don't even hear yourself when you're doing it. I don't personally want to be disrespectful. I don't want to talk over other people. What happens is I get so excited when somebody's talking about something that's interesting to me that I tend to just layer something on. And this was a real problem in our family dynamic, and I didn't even know it. Here's what happened. We've got 3 kids. We have our oldest, who is Sawyer, our middle daughter, Kendall, who's 21, and our son, who is 16. And then there's me and Chris. And about a year ago, we were at dinner talking up a storm, and Sawyer went to go tell a story. And Kendall and I, we literally jumped right in and started talking over her. And Sawyer took her hands and hit the table and said, "Will you guys stop it? You're always talking over me. Always. I'm so sick of it." And both Kendall and I kind of sat back and were like, whoa, we are? I didn't even know it. So Sawyer pointing it out was an incredible moment in our family. Because number 1, this has been a dynamic that's been driving her crazy for years. She has felt very disrespected. She is also a little bit more introverted. Kendall and I are extroverted. And we were unaware that we were basically engaging in behavior that made her feel disrespected, run over, unimportant. And it was simply because we were just jumping in on topics that she was talking about. And so ever since she's called me out on it, I am very, very, very mindful. I'm not always great at it, but I'm very mindful that when someone is talking, to please keep my mouth shut. So when someone talks over you and you start to feel disrespected, when somebody interrupts you and you feel disrespected, you need to call it out. Here's a couple ways that you can do it. You can do it like Sawyer did. You can throw your hands on the table and say, "Would you stop constantly interrupting and talking over me?" You can also keep talking. This is a really effective thing to do if you're at work. If you're at work in a meeting and somebody interrupts you, this happens to women all the time, and somebody starts talking over you, just keep talking and keep talking louder. Or you can say, "Excuse me, I was talking," and keep talking. Or you can say, "Hey, Mike, I was talking. Please don't interrupt me." Calling somebody out stops the disrespect and it empowers you because you're respecting yourself. All right, let's move on to number 2. So number 2, common form of disrespect that you need to call out is people in your life who are perpetually late. Now, I have a confession to make. This used to be me. One of the embarrassing things about making this video is literally these 7 types of disrespect are so common, I realized that I engaged in them in the past or I engage in them now. And you will probably, as you're listening to me, realize, holy cow, perpetual lateness, guilty as charged, Mel Robbins. That's a form of disrespect? Yes, it is. And again, people who are constantly running late, particularly those folks who don't give you a heads up if they're running late, but they breeze in 10 to 15 minutes late. "Oh, I'm sorry. Most people who are perpetually late are very hard on themselves and they feel bad about being late. And so they're so consumed by making themselves wrong that they don't realize that their lateness is enormously disrespectful to you. And so what you want to do if you've got somebody in your life who is running perpetually late, like I used to, is you need to call it out. You just need to call it out. because the person that's constantly running late is so busy beating themselves up, so busy feeling anxious because they're constantly running late, so consumed in the habit of being late and then saying, I'm sorry, and, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm sorry, that they haven't been yanked out of that and pulled to a higher conversation, which is one that's like, look, I get that you got stuff going on in your life, but when you show up 10 minutes late and I've been waiting for you, you are disrespecting my time. And if you do it again, I'm not going to make plans with you. When you put it in their behavior and how it's impacting you, most of us, when we're called out in that manner, like your lateness is a sign of disrespect, it's mortifying. And that's the kind of truth bomb that some people need, myself included, in order to understand the impact of your behavior that you're not getting intentional about changing. And look, occasionally running late, that's one thing. But a common form of disrespect is to have somebody in your life who is perpetually late, to roll your eyes, to gripe about it behind their back, but to never say anything about the fact that it actually bothers you. So when you say that it bothers you, please do not waste my time. Two things happen. You're going to cause, hopefully, a breakthrough and an awakening for the person who's perpetually late. And you're also going to feel a jolt of respect and confidence for yourself by calling it out. The third form of disrespect that's so common that you're probably not calling it out is when somebody is dismissive of you. So what is dismissiveness? Because it's not really being rude. The behavior's rude. But dismissiveness is when somebody's acting in a way that they are indifferent or they're disregarding you. Okay, so it's a little bit different than somebody just being flat out rude. It's sort of this subtle behavior where, holy cow, you're picking up this sign that somebody is totally indifferent to how you feel, or they're disregarding how you feel. And the most common form of this, and it is rampant, is when you're talking to somebody and all of a sudden they start looking at their phone. Like literally, how many times have you been in the middle of a conversation and either your friend or your partner or your kid or somebody at work, you're talking about something and you look at your friend and all of a sudden they look down at their phone? That is dismissiveness. If you are sitting at a table, right, and you're having lunch with somebody and you're busy having a conversation and this person is now texting somebody that's not there. Instead of being present with you, they're on their phone texting somebody that's not even present at lunch. That is dismissiveness. And you need to call it out because, number one, particularly as it relates to the phone, that's an addiction. People don't even realize that they're doing it. And it's become so ubiquitous in life that we literally don't even think about the impact that it's having on other people. And so if this is somebody, a friend, if this is a colleague, if this is somebody in your family, it's a partner, and somebody is being dismissive. They're looking at their phone, or you're pointing something out, oh my God, the full moon, and they don't even acknowledge it. That's showing indifference and disregard. And you need to call it out because that behavior is impacting you. Now, again, I'm starting to feel like the world's worst person because I'm realizing I have been called out on all this shit all the time. My husband has called me out on this in particular with the phone, that if, Mel, I'm talking to you, I want to have the experience of you paying attention. And he said to me, there's a very big difference between you hearing me and me experiencing that you're actually listening. How many times have you had that experience where you're talking to somebody and they're like on their phone, like, and they're like, are you even listening to me? And they're like, yeah, you said that you wanted to get pizza tonight instead of getting sushi. Now they heard what you said, but the way they were behaving was dismissive because they made you feel as though they were indifferent or were disregarding what you were saying. And so one of the things that happened for me, because I, of course, did not realize that that behavior made Chris feel like I was indifferent or that I could care less about what he was talking about, is I actually have a basket in my kitchen where we put the phone, It's there except for when the kids take it, which they did a couple days ago. So I'm realizing I need to actually replace the basket that's in the kitchen. And that's where the phone goes when I'm not working. And when I am with my husband, my phone is typically in my purse or on a counter. It's not on my person, because if it's on my person, I tend to pick it up. And it's only in the calling it out that I have become way more conscious about this behavior. Now, what's going to happen for you when you call out somebody that's being dismissive is you are going to feel more confident. You're going to feel more respect, because you are asking for what you need in order to be respected. And that's why it's so important to call this stuff out. Again, rule number one, most people that are engaging in these common forms of disrespect don't mean to be disrespecting you. So calling it out helps them and it helps you. So let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is when people are condescending. This one sucks. And again, this whole list is making me feel kind of bad about myself, because I'm realizing that I engage in being condescending. And so I'm going to give you an example of how subtle this can be. So my husband has this style of communicating where he kind of asks a question out loud. So he might turn to me and say, so are we getting snow this weekend in Vermont? And in the past, without even thinking, I will turn and go, do I look like a weatherman? I have no idea if we're getting snow in Vermont. Why don't you just Google it? I have no idea. So Chris is just casually asking about the weather, and I am being a condescending jerk. And so if somebody responds to a question, or somebody responds to something that you're saying in a condescending way, call it out. Chris is really good at this. I feel like I'm bringing you into a marriage therapy counseling session right now. But Chris is really good at this. So he'll literally go, dude, you don't have to use that tone of voice. I was just asking if you knew what the weather was. I thought maybe since you're online all day, you would have seen the weather report. And it's easier to ask you, Mel, than it is to Google. When somebody points out that you're being condescending, honestly, I personally feel like a jerk. So I appreciate it when somebody calls me on my tone of voice, which my kids also do, or they point out when I'm being a little bit rude and I didn't mean to. And it makes me a kinder and a nicer person. Now, what is it going to do for you? It's going to make you feel better about yourself, because every time you call out somebody's tone of voice, or you call out a demeaning way that they're talking to you, you feel a little bit better about yourself, because you're not putting up with that crap, because you don't have to. Number 5 common way that people are showing disrespect is when they're pressuring you. I'm sure you've had this happen. You don't feel like going out. You don't want to get out of your sweats and get off your couch and turn off the television and go meet your friends out, even though you said that you would. This is the kind of pressure that you get when you're like, guys, it's been a long day at work and I just don't want to go out. I've changed my mind. You send the text, and then what are you getting back? Oh, come on. You're such a party pooper. You never go out anymore. That kind of pressure blows. And it's disrespectful. Like, what you want to hear from your friends, what you want to hear from your family is, totally get it. We're going to miss you. Is there anything that you need from us? And so you need to call it out, because you're not supposed to be a battering ram for that kind of pressure just because people are annoyed that you don't want to do something that they want to do. Stand your ground, do what works for you, and do not put up with it. Because some nights you just need to be in your sweats, and you need to watch TV, and you need to do what works for you. Forget the pressure and focus on yourself. All right, let's go to number 6. And number 6, ooh, this one stings. This is one of those forms of disrespect that when it happens to you, you're like, did you really just say that to me? Really? And that is a backhanded compliment. Oof. Those backhanded compliments. What is a backhanded compliment? It's like when somebody says something that in their stupidity, they think is going to make you feel good, but underneath it, there's this underlying assumption about you that actually hits you, because it is the opposite of making you feel good. And here are some common examples of backhanded compliments. Oh, you're going back to work? That's so great. I could never let my kids be with a stranger all day, or I'd feel so bad if I put my kids in daycare. Wait, did you compliment me about going back to work, or did you slam me for putting my kids into daycare? Which one is it? Because it's not this, it can't be both, right? Or how about this one? Oh my gosh, you're so articulate for somebody who just graduated from college. Or your hair looks so professional when it's straight. You should really straighten it more often. Or, God, you look so much better without makeup. Now, the context is really key, because there are some friends or family members that when they say something to you about the fact that you just look so good without makeup, they actually mean it. They're not saying, boy, you do a terrible job at makeup. They actually mean it. But there's times when you get these kinds of backhanded compliments where you know that it's really not a compliment at all. We were also laughing about the fact, as we were talking about this video, my team and I, that I could come up with this example. I have not actually said this to my husband yet, but I realized that if I'm not careful, it would come out as a backhanded compliment. So my husband has recently discovered this amazing type of pants that Lululemon makes that sort of look like khakis, but they're not really khakis. They're really like performance fabric joggers. And I don't really love them on my husband. I prefer when my husband wears a particular style of jeans. I just think he looks so great and so pulled together, and they're really flattering. And the problem is that these Lululemon pants that he has found are really soft. They're really comfortable. And he now wears them all the time. He wears them with clogs. Not the greatest look. He wears them when we're going out to dinner. Not exactly my favorite look. Are they fine around the house? Of course. Are they fine when you're doing chores? Of course. Are they fine when you're exercising? Absolutely. But this little backhanded compliment thing is making me realize that when I make the request or I compliment the fact that he's wearing jeans, I need to do it in a way that's really respectful and really empowering, instead of sliding into the area of a backhanded compliment. So I'm going to work on that. All right. And the final one is lack of consideration. This one is kind of sneaky. And it's happens a lot because people get so wrapped up and focused in what they're doing that they don't realize that what they're doing is having an impact on you that feels like disrespect. So here's a scenario. You're sitting, at the kitchen table, and you're working on something. You're typing, or you're writing, or you're reading, and somebody in your family or your partner comes in, turns on the television, and starts watching television or watching a game, and it's really loud, and now you're distracted. I can give you another one because my kids do this all the time, or at least they used to until I started calling it out. I would be cooking dinner, and all three of the kids would be on their phones, and they would be watching TikTok videos with their volume on. So all three of them are watching different videos with different sounds, all going at the same time. And none of them seem to be bothered by it. But it has a lack of consideration that feels really disrespectful. Well, it certainly feels disrespectful to me because I find it really distracting when I'm listening to three different videos playing at the same time. And so calling it out not only will point out behavior that somebody may not even realize is distracting. I mean, if you have the ability to watch a video and just pay attention to your sound and tune out all the other sounds around you, that's a superpower. And so you don't realize that the fact that you're listening to something out loud is really kind of disrespectful to everyone around you. I'm sure you've been like on a plane, or you've been on a subway, or you've been just standing in line at a coffee shop and somebody's watching their phone and they got the volume up, and you're like, are you serious here? Or they're on FaceTime with their grandma. Hey grandma, how you doing? And you're standing in line at a coffee shop. Super disrespectful. You might not call out a stranger, but you certainly want to point out to somebody, hey, could you lower that down? Or, hey, would you mind putting some headphones on, trying to concentrate over here on something, or it's kind of loud. Calling that kind of stuff, it is so important, because what happens is people, again, don't realize that what they're doing is a form of common disrespect. And when you call it out, you are showing yourself some respect. And every time you do, I promise you, it's going to boost your confidence. Let's go to St. Petersburg, Florida, where Chantel is waiting to ask me a question. Chantel, welcome to the live stream. Hi. So you wrote in with a question, but why don't you just tell me a little bit about the issue that you're dealing with?
So my girlfriend and I have been dating for like a little over 2 years, and right now with this whole pandemic issue, I think I have the biggest communication problem in our relationship. She's very expressive, and she wants to know how I feel about things and what I'm thinking, and I internalize a lot of things. I don't want to communicate. You know, growing up, that really wasn't something that was taught. Like everyone that I have seen, like growing up, my family, everyone just shuts down, withdraws, and okay, abuela, estoy en un meeting.
Oh, that's right. I'm not seeing that. Who is that?
Okay, my grandmother.
Hi, Grandma. How are you? Welcome to the live stream, Grandma. She's adorable. I love her hot pink pants. Amazing. We love you. Thank you for taking care of her. Adorable. Okay.
Oh, sorry about that.
So keep going. So you grew up in a family where you were witnessing the adults shutting down to avoid conflict?
Yeah, everyone shuts down, withdraws, no one wants to talk, and then a few days or weeks or even months go by, and then it's like, okay, just move on and act like nothing ever happened. That's what I witnessed, and that's what I have been doing, and I've gotten a lot better, you know, reading some books and watching videos and stuff, and just learning more about how to communicate better. But it's like, even like right now, because I'm not working and just being in each other's face 24/7, it's like, okay, no, I withdraw. I just, you know, I don't even want to talk about it. And I'll go, you know, I just want to sleep. And it's like, just let the days go by. Hopefully this will be over soon. And, you know, and it just doesn't go over well with her. So.
And what is her reaction when you withdraw? When you withdraw, do you just get silent, or do you leave the room? What's your mode of withdrawing?
I just feel like when there's like a lot of tension between us, I just want to go, you know, out for a walk or something, or even just lay in bed, and I don't even want to talk. And she wants to try and work things out, and like, let's talk about this. What's bothering you? You know, how can we find a solution? And I'm like, you know, just forget it. I internalize a lot of things, and so she'll say something, and I immediately jump to the conclusion that she doesn't love me anymore, or this isn't going to work, or something's wrong with our relationship. What's going on? And she's more of a like, let's find a solution, you know. And I'm like, I freak out, and I like, you know, just withdraw. And yeah.
Well, so Chantel, there's so much that I want to share with you that is going to change not only your relationship, but it's going to change your life, because it's going to give you an understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. And it's going to give you a couple simple tools that you can use to start to crack the code on being able to both draw boundaries for yourself emotionally, so that you feel supported, while you're also working on becoming a better communicator, okay? So this question is so relevant for so many couples, and I'm so proud of you for sharing it. The first thing I want to do is I want to acknowledge you. because you zeroed in on the reason why you do this. Every single one of us learned how to communicate positively or negatively based on what we saw growing up. And it takes hold in us before you even realize. Most of this patterning is what I'm going to call it, that you have absorbed. You absorbed by the age of 5. So if what you saw in your household is that the moment there was conflict, people shut down, this is a pattern. It's neither good nor bad. It's just a pattern. We all learned our parents' patterns. Our parents were just doing the best that they could. It's not a matter of whether or not your parents are good parents or bad parents. This is just how your parents and your caregivers dealt with the stress and conflict in their life. They avoided it. And so it's no surprise that you now are an adult feeling stuck. And the reason why you feel stuck is because you are stuck in a pattern. And the reason why I like talking about it in terms of patterns is because it's not personal. The great thing about patterns is once you recognize that you have one and you can identify it and you can identify the situations where this pattern takes over like that, and suddenly next thing you know, you're sleeping in your bed instead of talking to your girlfriend. Once you identify the pattern, you see that it's broken because it's making you feel broken right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you feel like you don't have control over yourself. And so what I want you to first understand is, number one, you're really smart because you know the origin of this. Number two, you simply have a pattern that's broken now that you're an adult. And number three, you can replace patterns that are broken because you're not broken. You just have a pattern that are broken. Okay, so how does that make you feel knowing it's simply a pattern and we can replace it?
Yeah, that feels really good, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm learning to do that now at 31.
Hey, you know what? I'm 51. I'm 2 decades ahead of you. There's I am dealing with every day. It seems like I see another pattern. And so here's the thing that I want you to understand about patterns. Patterns like this, patterns of behavior, they are not stored up here. They are in your nervous system. There's a term called ghosts in the nursery, which refers to something that psychologists talk about, which basically means that when you were itty bitty, tiny, and there was conflict, and I'm not talking like punching or anything in your household, but just like people arguing, okay? So when you experience conflict, your nervous system knew people were fighting. And then what you saw with your eyes is you saw everybody shut up and leave the room. What do you remember your caregivers doing whenever there was an argument?
Not talking, my stepdad in the room, watching TV, eating fast food, my mom, downstairs doing her own thing, and they won't ever talk about anything. And then like days go by, and I guess once everyone feels like, okay, it's over, let's move on, and they don't ever revisit why they argued in the first place or where the issue was. It's kind of like, let's just move on and pretend like nothing ever happened. That's my relationship with my mom right now still, or she'll do that and like spend months not talking to me. And so like, I'm trying not to do that.
And guess what?
My relationship.
Well, and here's the opportunity. I guarantee you this is something your mother learned. And so this is a generational pattern. And so the opportunity here is for you to not only be able to heal yourself and to be able to strengthen your relationship both to yourself and with your girlfriend, but you also have an opportunity to break a generational pattern, which is super amazing. And it doesn't mean that your mom's a bad person. This is just what she has learned to do.
For sure. My grandma did the same thing, and I'm sure her mom did the same. Yeah.
So here's what I want you to understand about your nervous system. Given that you saw this growing up, you saw them separate, you saw them not talking. What happens now that you're an adult, now that you've seen this, and this is what was modeled for you,
is that whenever you're in a situation where you start to feel, uh-oh, my girlfriend's getting upset with me, uh-oh, she wants to talk, uh-oh, we just bickered about something, before you even think, I gotta talk, your nervous system remembers what it was like to be a kid in a household when your parents were about to argue with each other, or when your parents got upset with each other. And what you witnessed was separation. So before you even think, what happens is your nervous system goes, oh, wait a minute, I recognize this. This is a moment of conflict. I know what to do. I leave when this happens, because that's what I saw. And
Run away.
Right?
Yeah.
It happens before you even think about it. And so here's what I want you to understand. You and I can talk about this very easily. Because we're dealing with your nervous system, I'm going to give you a plan that's going to involve two things. The first thing it's going to involve is things that you can do when conflict arises with your girlfriend in order for you to be able to be more constructive and be more connected with her to resolve conflict. That's number one. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you some simple things that you can do to start to get back in touch with yourself, okay? Because this is going to be about you creating new programming, just like a computer. You got your mom and your stepdad and your grandmother's programming in you. We need to update the operating system, okay? And so what I want you to do is, first of all, are you comfortable talking through something that is a conflict? You know what I mean? Like, does talking about it, what do you feel in your body if your girlfriend wants to talk through something and it feels like there's tension? What do you feel?
I just automatically I jump to conclusions, and I start thinking that maybe she's not even this is not even true. I just make these assumptions that she's not loving me anymore, she's falling out of love, or this relationship is damaged and maybe we can't fix it, and just dumb stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's not dumb, because why do you think you equate any kind of disagreement with a lack of love?
I don't know.
Think back to your childhood. Why do you think disagreeing means lack of love? Is it because your dad and mom divorced?
Well, they divorced, and they fought a lot growing up. A lot of arguing, a lot of verbal abuse. So I don't ever want a relationship like that. Our relationship is not unhealthy. I've really strived to try and be more, not like do anything that's gonna create any kind of like unhealthy relationship, but my inability to communicate is doing that, and it frustrates her a little, and
it frustrates you too.
It does. I really wish I could be more open about how I feel.
I can boil this down to you. You ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
I think you made a decision a long time ago. And the decision that you made is that couples that fight break up, and couples that don't talk about what's upsetting them stay together.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all that this is. You saw two relationships, and the one that went the longer distance is between your mom and your stepdad. And what you witnessed is they just didn't fight, and somehow they survived.
My mom and dad fought a lot, and there was a lot of arguing and verbal abuse. They broke up. And so you have equated fighting and conflict with whether or not a relationship survives.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising to me that because you love your girlfriend and because you want this to work, you would adopt the pattern from the couple that you saw that lasted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And since this is all tied to situations when you're about to start fighting, your nervous system is reminded of this paradigm of this couple fought and broke up, this couple didn't, and they stayed together. And so your nervous system immediately opts for not saying anything. Now, this is a huge insight because it boils it down to something really simple. And what you have to understand based on the research, I'm imploring you, is that the healthiest and happiest long-term marriages are between couples who actually fight. Because knowing how to have a constructive conflict brings you closer together. And so knowing how to have a disagreement and still be able to stand with your partner and work through it, that's what will lead you to not only feeling good about yourself, because then you can express yourself freely without the fear that somebody's not going to love you, but it will also make you and your partner stronger, because you know through the ups and downs of life, you are able to work through these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Terrific. So let me give you some advice for a couple things that you can do. First of all, you said you were reading some books. So what have you tried that has worked so that I can build on it?
Well, right now I'm reading Unfuck Yourself. You know, that's really good. I've read a couple books.
What are you learning though? What is it that's learned that's made a difference for you?
That it's all about your thoughts. You know, learning to take control of your thoughts, and that will lead to you having more control over your emotions and your actions. That, you know, I struggle with because a lot of times I do think negatively. I just jump to negative thinking a lot.
Well, one thing that you can do for that is I did this free course a year ago called Mindset Reset. It's 30 days long. It's totally free. You should retake it if you've already taken it.
Yeah, I'm going
And
to.
you should use it, the 30 days of videos. Just go to melrobbins.com/mindset reset. It's 30 days of free videos and a workbook. And you should use just your negative thoughts about relationships as the thing that you're going to decode and reprogram in your mind, okay? Because we already know one negative thought you have, that couples that fight break up, and couples that don't fight and give each other the silent treatment, they stay together. It's actually not true. And so you've got to change that opinion. The second thing is that you have decided that when your girlfriend has something that she's in conflict with you about, that it means that she doesn't love you.
Right.
The fact is, if she's coming to you about it, it means she loves you and wants to work through it. And so here's what I want you to start. First of all, does she know that you want to have a breakthrough in this?
Of course. We talk about that all the time. Like once I break through that whole, like, I'm not talking and what's the point? There's no point to this and this is useless. Why talk about it and blah, blah, blah. Eventually we'll talk and I'm like, yeah, I do have an issue with, communicating, and I do want to change that. I want to be better.
You don't have an issue with communicating. You have an issue with being loved.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
I don't know. I just don't think I'm worthy in some ways. I don't know. Like before I met her, you know, I was a devoted Christian, you know, and it really took a lot for me to be open to this homosexual like lifestyle thing, because it's like wrong.
It's not.
And then the people that you think love you and are there for you, like, kind of turn their back because you're a homosexual. And so, like, yeah, you know, when the people you thought were like your tight circle, you know, they were there for you, and you know, they were like, you know, they love you and they love to see you grow and get better, and I was doing great. But then it's like, okay, a huge part of me is missing, because, you know, I'm envisioning myself marrying a man, having a husband, and having a family, you know, and that's not what I want. That's not what I feel attracted to, you know. And, you know, then I meet her and it's like a huge issue. And so, you know, I left, you know, because I want to be happy too. Why can all of them date and be in relationships and get married and have kids, and then I can't because, oh, I'm not attracted to that, you know? It's just stupid. So, yeah, so I left and I moved to St. Petersburg to get away and start a new life and be happy for once.
Well, I'm really proud of you, because moving away and choosing to be happy is probably the first decision that you have ever made where you chose yourself.
Yeah. Instead of what everyone else wants or thinks it's the best thing for me.
Yes, and it is the hardest thing in life to do, to stop making decisions that betray who you are for the sake of what some church says, or the sake of what your friends say, or the sake of what your family expected. And so you should know that you have done the hardest thing in the world for anybody to do, which is to recognize who you are at your core and to choose yourself. And one of the things that is going to be remarkable when you stop going silent, when you argue with your girlfriend, and when you stop using the silent treatment, is that it will be a way for you to choose yourself again. Because I think that when you go silent, it is two things. It's both unconscious, because it's what you saw and you want this to work. And so this is the pattern that you saw with your caregivers. That's number one. But number two, it's also the way you test her. So if you go away from an argument, you're taking control by removing yourself and seeing if she actually loves you enough to come and find you.
And she's done that. And I think I have used up all of those chances, and now it's like, I'm not gonna chase after you now. I'm not gonna do what you want me to do now.
So now the stakes are really high. And so this is the moment that we all change. When you become super present to what a broken pattern is costing you, that is when we all decide to change, because change has to be deeply personal. And so I want you to also realize that just like claiming and choosing yourself and living fully open as a gay woman was a way to choose yourself and to stop betraying yourself, I want you to do the same thing with this communication pattern. Because every time you leave the room, every time you tell yourself that she doesn't love me and she's going to leave me if we fight, and every time you do this, you are actually betraying yourself. Because what I see is a 31-year-old woman who wants to have her voice, who wants to be able to say what is going on with you, who wants to talk about what she's feeling, because for so long you didn't.
And so this is your chance with somebody who loves you to start practicing, learning how to choose and honor yourself by giving yourself the permission and the space to say what you're feeling. And so there are a couple things that I think will help you a lot. First of all, I think the two of you should work together to come up with a sentence that you say when you are arguing. And maybe it is something like, babe, I am not going to leave you. I am standing right here. I am not going anywhere. And we need to talk about this. And you need to stand here with me. Like maybe what you need is just that reassurance up front. I love you. This is why I'm telling you why I'm upset. Let's work through it. Maybe you need that as a safe word, so to speak, to cue you that this is a moment to stay. Okay? The second thing that I want you to do is I want you to always use the I statements. So when we get into arguments with the people that we love, or with anybody for that matter, and we start going, well, you do this, and then you raise your voice, and then you do this thing, and right? You always, always, always want to use I feel. So when you start to do this to her, but when you do that and you there's three fingers pointing back at you, and the power is always right here. And so when you're arguing, I know it's uncomfortable for you to talk about your feelings. You can say, I am scared to say this because I'm scared you're going to leave. I'm scared to say this because my mom and stepdad never talked about anything. So this is new for me. You can always talk about what's going on for you. I feel sad when this happens. I feel scared. I feel invisible. I feel worthless. Because a lot of us, when we start arguing, we argue about the bullshit on the surface, but really what's going on is something underneath is getting triggered. And so for you to always anchor in choosing what you're feeling and choosing to say it out loud, it's a way for you to live even more openly and more fully and be more connected to her. The final thing I want to give you is that if this is a really intense argument about something, and you really do need a second to cool down, the only way that it is, I think, respectful to yourself and to your partner, if you need to go do something and remove yourself, is to say, I need 30 minutes. You put a timeline on it. And then you say, and then I promise I will come back and I will resolve this with you. And then I just thought of one more thing. Because this is a situation where your nervous system has taught you to shut up in situations where you feel threatened, and any kind of disagreement makes you feel threatened to your core, you might find it helpful to say, can I just take a second and write how I'm feeling down on a piece of paper? Because in retraining yourself to be able to have conversations that feel full of conflict or make you feel vulnerable or uncertain or scared that she's going to leave, you may not be able to get it all out because you're going to be managing everything that she's doing. So you might want to start by saying, can I just take a minute and just start writing down what I'm feeling so I have it in front of me so that I tell you everything?
Yeah.
What do you think about those steps?
I think those are very useful. I think I can definitely implement those in my life and see how that's going to change things, my relationship with her,
Well, the one thing I know in talking to you is that you're going to be okay. And you are going to have a life full of love because you're doing the really
hard work right now of learning how to love yourself. And if you can leave a church, and you can leave a friend group, and you can leave perhaps some relatives, and you can choose yourself and live your life openly and fully as a gay woman, then you are 95% of the way there. It's just now about letting somebody else in to all
Yeah.
the things that you're feeling. And you've just faced a ton of assholes who rejected you because of their own bigotry. And so I'm not surprised that this is a really tender moment in your own personal transformation. But every time you choose to stand in that moment that's terrifying, and you choose yourself, and you choose to express what you're feeling, and you choose to stand there and love yourself enough, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you like this one, I have a feeling you're going to like this one too. I'll see you there.